2, need and expectation of interested party. This is the example, like for example, what is expected? What is the requirement of this standard ISO 9000? Let's say interested party, in this case, manager, human resource. The standard requires that provision of required resources. And what is the need and expectation? Need is and expected out of this interested party, manager, HR, to provide required manpower within specified budget, to ensure that employees working in the premises are competent, to provide necessary training identified in training need assessment to enhance the awareness level. This is just an example. Similarly, manager quality assurance or quality assurance department as a department to minimize non-conformances. This is the requirement by the standard. So all these standards, either ISO 9000, 14,000 or 45,000, they give you the requirements. And then you develop your system to ensure that the requirements given, these standards don't give you the solution. They give you the requirement. Like, for example, requirement means the standard gives you the requirement that you have to go out of this room. How will you go? Will you go by running? Will you go by walking? Will you go by crawling? No, they does not. However, yes, there are guidelines also. They are called compendium. There are guidelines also. For every clause, there is a comprehensive guideline that is called compendium. But standard itself is just a small document, 15 to 20 pages document that gives you the requirements based on different clauses and subclauses. Scope of quality management, you see a star on this QMS. So if it is QMS, quality management system, the scope is about QMS. If it is EMS, it is environment, OHS. So if it is combined, the scope is IMS. Scope means that you need to determine the scope. Where are you going to use? If you have a big concern, big organization, which part of the organization is going to go for IMS or QMS or EMS, right? And then you identify the internal and external issues according to the requirements of relevant interested parties and products and services. QMS 9000, if we say ISO 9000 or 14,000 or 45,000, 4.4 clause gives you the requirements related to processes that you need to determine in input and output of your processes. What is the sequence and interaction of each process? Simply on the right-hand side, PFC, process flow chart, or process flow diagram. So the interrelation of processes you need to define through process flow charts. That this is the process. After this process, then is the next process, then this is the quality control. And if it is environment, so what are the processes where you are polluting the air? There is a wastewater, or there is, so that I will cover in the next slide, in the coming slides. So the standard clause 4.4 require that you must define your processes in a clear way so that you understand what is the input and output of that specific process, right? And what are the acceptance criteria from one process to the other. So that is simple, not a very difficult, not a rocket science. You need to develop your process flow charts and determine the resources needed and assign responsibilities, address risks and opportunities, evaluate, analyze, and improve the system. So that is the requirement of 4.4. How do you do it? You need to define your protocols, your SOPs, your work instructions, your process flow, right? Another one very interesting thing. None of these standards tell you to write your procedures in English or in written form. It says documented everywhere. If you look at any of the standards, it says document. And document can be a written instruction, document can be a pictorial instruction, document can be an audio, document can be a video, right? Like in number of organizations inside the country and abroad also. I happen to work abroad also. Uh, there are instructions given for the workers' safety. You need not to write long, lengthy procedures. Yes, you can for managerial people, for your own record. You can have written, obviously, documents. But for better implementation and control, for understanding of your staff, your workers, you can display instructions. Like if you want to convey that people working in the chemical area must wear masks, gloves, apron, gumboots, caps. So you can just put a picture so that they understand that this area requires safety clothing, right? So this is one of the things. So we need to ensure that these standards are truly implemented. Unluckily, I will not talk anything positive, but we conducted a survey back in 2002 from the platform of Ministry of Science and Technology, and we surveyed over 385 organizations across Pakistan. 2005, sorry, 2005. And we prepared the questionnaires and we surveyed 385 organizations who were certified for ISO 9000 or 14,000. And we found out that only 7% of organizations have truly implemented, right? Which is which was a big eye opener. But now I see number of organizations. There are many organizations who are truly implementing and they are seeing the benefit. If you go to the West, I believe they are really following these standards in true letter and spirit. So we need to ensure that we follow and make best use of these standards rather than just getting a certificate and displaying on the wall, which is a waste of time, waste of money, waste of everything. You can get a certification by doing simple documentation, get a 33% marks and get the certificate, right? But if you really want to see the benefits, you need to make an effort. You need to truly implement these standards in your organizations. Clause 5 is leadership. That leadership, all three standards, 9, 14, 45, communication, customer focus, and provision of resources. So leadership means the communicating the importance of QMS or EMS or OHS policies and procedures and objectives. So it has to be driven from the top. The top management must demonstrate through various actions that they really want to implement these standards in true letter and spirit. So this is a simple clause that says that you must define the policy. What is your policy related to quality management? What is your policy related to environmental management? How will you ensure that you have a better environment and a safe workplace? So that must be different. A policy is not that just a slogan which is written on the wall. Everything derives from your policy. Your objectives derives from your policy. So it must be properly understood right at the top level. And that is the document which comes from the top. The top management gives the strategy. The top management gives the policy, right? And based on that, the top management says everybody is to come on time and pack up on time. That is the policy. So how you do it? So based on that policy, you develop your methodology, you develop your strategy. Same goes for quality management. Same goes for environmental management. Same goes for occupational. So the top management tells you that environmental management, we will ensure that we will have a clean workspace, that we will ensure that we will reduce pollution, we will prevent pollution, we will take actions on all those areas where we have uh, pollution, or where we have wastewater discharge, where we have emissions, where we have heat, more heat. So all those things need to be defined in the policy, and the policy must be made public. It must be approved by the top management, and it must be communicated to everyone, and needs to be reviewed periodically, at least once a year. The standard required that your policy related to quality, environment, safety must be reviewed at least once a year, right? A review does not mean that you change it. Review means see whether it is appropriate, whether it is effective, whether it is understood by all the people, whether it is being implemented, whether all our practices and procedures are in line with these policies, right? So 5.2, very important. All three standards are aligned and they require that the policy must be given the top priority. 5.3, organization role, responsibility, and authority. It must be clearly defined. If it is quality management, what are the responsibilities of a person related to quality management? Environmental responsibility. If a manager production is working, he has certain job descriptions. So what is his responsibility related to environmental management? What is his responsibility related to occupational safety? That must be clearly defined and communicated to all concerned. Okay, so as far as this clause is concerned, policy, organization chart, job description, responsibility matrix. What is responsibility matrix? Responsibility matrix is that the best way, the best practice to develop these matrices. On the left-hand column, you write various tasks. Who is responsible to ensure that fire extinguishers across the organization will be kept updated and they will be inspected? Who is the person? Kiski primary responsibility hai kisi? And on the matrix, you write their designation. Section in charge. Manager HIC is the primary responsible person, and so on. So this is very important. Who is responsible to ensure that all the equipment is properly calibrated? Who is responsible to take actions in case of any accident? Who is responsible to ensure if there are holdups in the production? Who is responsible if there is any emission that is going out of limits, nitrogen oxide or sulfur oxide content is more, and you find that your emissions are harmful for the people? Who is responsible to ensure? So that is given in the matrix. This is a very important thing. And most of the organizations, they just have job description and the responsibility matrix are missing. This is one very important thing that I would like to convey, that every organization must have responsibility matrix. Clause 6 is planning. Planning, what do we mean by planning? If we talk of quality management, planning means that you identify your business risks, map your processes, identify what are the potential risks associated with that activity, determine the probability and consequences, calculate these risks through internationally defined formulas. Consequences multiplied by chances of occurrence, that gives you certain number, and there is a defined methodology. Same process for quality, same process for environmental management, same process for hazard identification analysis, right? As you can see on the right-hand side. If we are talking of only ISO 9000, then you identify your business risks. If we are talking of environmental management, you identify what are the environmental aspects, what are those activities which are harmful for the people, for your environment, for air, for land, water, flora, fauna, all these things. Right? Similarly, for hazards, what are those activities which are harmful for your people, which are hazardous for your people, which are unsafe for the work environment, right? So all this is covered under this clause. How to calculate the risk? Risk means you must know what is the potential, like as far as business risk is concerned, the consequences can be loss of business, potential harm to the worker, inability to meet contract. So these are certain risks that you need to define for quality business. Quality means business risks, product related. Environmental risks means risk related to environment. Occupational safety risks means risk related to workers and workplace safety and health issues. Some of the examples of your business risks in quality management, like for example, supplier evaluation is the process. What can be the possible risks? Non-availability of acceptance criteria. You really don't know how to evaluate your supplier. If you do not have a good supply chain, if you do not have a competent supplier, your business is going to affect. Your quality will be inconsistent. So that is a business risk. And what are the consequences? Inability to meet contract. Maybe your supplier is not competent. You do not have the system to evaluate it. They provide you the equipment. Let's say if you are producing something through sheet metal, they provide you corroded sheets, and you don't meet the contractual obligations, right? So for that, there is a risk methodology which I'll show you on the next slide. So that is a system to calculate. As I said in my previous sessions also, these sessions are just the teasers, just to create awareness that you know the subject. Inshallah, we will be having full 2 days, 3 days lead implementer trainings very soon, in which we will be going through, we will be doing the workshops, we will be doing hands-on practices. We conduct these trainings commercially as well, and we conduct these trainings on site as well. Any organization that wants this training, we can conduct that. So this session, these are short sessions just to create awareness so that you can take a start, right? Okay. Objectives. Now, what do you mean by SMART? SMART objectives क्या होते हैं? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Specific means, you see, objectives are not the slogans. We will be number one in Pakistan. What do you mean by this? This is just a slogan. We will be the best. We will have zero waste. These are just slogans. Objectives should be very specific. The corporate organizational objectives and departmental objectives have to be according to your work philosophy. If you are developing objectives for your production department, you need to consider their scope of work. If you are developing objectives for your quality control or quality assurance, you have to consider. So there should be specific. If you are developing objectives for your HSE department, for your accounts department, for your purchase department, so they have to be very specific to those areas. It is not general that you have just developed the objectives in general. So they have to be specific. Like for your training, let's say you have a training department. They develop objective that we will provide ISO awareness training to 30% of our staff by December 2024. This is achievable. This is measurable. This is realistic and time bound. If they say we will provide training to everybody during the month of August, that is everybody, that seems unrealistic. Right? Depends. If it is a very small organization, fine, it can be achieved. But if it is a large organization, you cannot really stop the work and provide training to 100% of your staff within a month, right? So they have to be realistic and time bound. We will get ISO certification for our organization, ISO 9000 or ISO 14000 or IMS certification by December 2024. So time bound. So it can be measured. We will reduce wastages by 5% with respect to last year. So once you make these objectives, then your job starts. How? आपने objective तो बना दिया, but how are you going to achieve that objective? So for that, you have a management program, as you can see here in this view file. You objective number fla, department this, target date is, let's say, December 2024. Objective is to reduce our wastages by 5% with respect to last year by December 2024. So in order to achieve this objective, what all actions are to be done? What are the steps? Number one, you must have data of last year. So do you have that data? So first activity is to organize last year's data. Who is the person responsible? Mr. Miss Flafla. Target date, resources required. And that's how you develop your, it's not that you develop an objective that you will do this by December 2024. Until December, you're just sitting tight. So you have to give a realistic objective. If you can achieve your objective in 1 month, fine, do it. So if you are giving a longer duration, it must be supported by management program, which is shown here. Okay. So these are the reference documents as far as this clause is concerned. Clause 7 is support. You need resources for quality management, for environmental management, for occupational safety. So the organization standard requires, clause 7.1, determine the resources needed for this job. Provide resources and maintain resources. Include people, infrastructure, and work environment. So simple. Competence. What is competence? What do we mean by competence? Competence means a person very qualified, a PhD, working as a manager QA. He's highly educated, right? But he doesn't have that requisite skills required for that criteria. Skill is generally taken for the worker, worker ki skill hai, right? For professionals also, we have the skill criteria, right? So competence is experience, skill, training, and education. I'll just give you a very small example. I was in China, Bogdo, Nanchang Aircraft Manufacturing Factory. We were 9 Air Force officers, aeronautical engineers who were deployed there to participate in their designing. So we visited a factory NAMC, Nanchang Aircraft Manufacturing Factory, which is making parts for JF-17, F-77, and K-8 and A-5 and so on. So while having the round of the factory, we came across a person who was just bending aluminum pipes which are used in the landing gear for pneumatic air के लिए जो landing gears की brakes के use होते हैं front nose. He was just bending, throwing. We just stopped. We just got a shock and we just stopped. What is this happening? This process is supposed to be done on a hydraulic jig that you place a pipe and press the button that this is the strength, this is the force, and the tool bends automatically through hydraulic. So when we stopped, their manager just gave a smile and he said, you pick up any of these items. There were about 30, 40, 50, I don't know, so many items lying, which he was just bending and throwing. We picked it and we put it in that jig. So every item was as per this. So that is a skill. So that maybe that guy was working on this system for last maybe 10, 15 years. So he has developed that skill and people trust his skill because of his results. The rejections are zero, negligible, right? So skill obviously really matters. But it has to be obviously you need. On the other hand, we also observe in some of the organization, the people who are like in testing laboratories, we conducted inter-lab comparisons, and we observed that people who are relying on their memory, who are working in the labs for last 10, 15, 20 years, they give a damn about these written practices and test methods. And based on their past experience, they do the testing and their results were wrong. So it's a long example. I'll cover it some other time. I have to get faster. The time is getting short for us. Okay. Competence means identify training needs, provide training, evaluate training effectiveness, and maintain records. Awareness, again, 7.3 clause required that you need to provide training and awareness to the people. Communication, what are the ways and means for communication? Okay, clause 8 is about operations, customer communication. I will just move on to the next slide. Performance evaluation. What are the ways to measure the performance? So it is customer surveys, customer feedback, complaint system, and so on. Internal audit is the system by which you carry out the audits to know the health and state of your organization. And then you conduct management review meetings to see what is the performance. Improvement, there are different tools for improvement. One is corrective and preventive actions. So just a quick one. Module 2, environmental management system. What is the environment? Surroundings in which organizations operate. It includes air, water, land, natural resources, flora. Flora means plantation. Fauna, aquatic animals, human being and their interaction. Air, water, land, flora, fauna, human being and their interaction. Aspects here. You need to identify what are those activities which are affecting these 7 things, right? Elements of organizations, activities, products or services that can interact with the environment, that are called aspects. Like if you have a generator, it will give smoke, it will have sound, right? So environmental aspects, these are some of the examples. In case of welding, you have emissions of ferrous fumes. The impact is air pollution. This is the risk assessment formula. O stands for chances of occurrence, D, chances of detection, C, severity of consequences. So this is how you calculate. In case of business risks, there are only 2, chances of occurrence and consequences. In case of environment, it is chances of occurrence, chances of detection. You see, if something has gone wrong, if you have a chimney which is emitting fumes, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, and you have an online system, whenever there is the level of nitrogen oxide is more, it will give you a beep, right? So your risk is reduced, right? So there is a table to calculate the risk, chances of occurrence. It is expected anytime. It is very high. You give a 5 score. If it is none, you give 0. If it's very low, the event may occur occasionally. Similarly, chances of detection, if you have the quick detection system, the risk is reduced. And severity means if it is very high, irreversible, damage to life, property, catastrophic, you give maximum marks. So if you give more marks, so the risk will be more. Similarly, as far as occupational health and safety is concerned, occupational health and safety means conditions and factors that affect or could affect health and safety of employees or workers, including temporary workers or contractors, visitors, or any other person. So anybody at the workplace is the responsibility of the organization, their safety and health. What is ill health? There is one thing which is called incident or accident, that you have a worker who cuts his finger, it's an accident and there's a damage. But if there is a worker who is working at a very high noise area, there is apparently no physical injury, but he is going to have negative impacts on his health. Similarly, if there's a worker working in the high fume areas, he or she is going to have negative ill health effects on his or her health, right? You need to develop the methodology, identify the hazard, and so again, this is the formula, chances of occurrence and severity of consequences. And again, this is the risk methodology. You need to go through it to understand, right? And that's how this is the risk matrix, chances of occurrence, and severity. If the risk factor is more, and you have a table and you give the scoring accordingly to different activities. This is done activity-wise, right? The comparison, you can just go through these slides to see the comparison of whatever we discussed so far, right? So with this, we come to the end of, we are left with only 3 minutes. So please, thank you very much. You join our Facebook, join our LinkedIn, stay in touch with us. My contact, my email is also there. My mobile is there. Any issue, any problem, whatever questions you have mentioned, rest assured, we will reply those questions. Since these online trainings, we have a constraint of time and communication. So we will stay in touch. If you have any questions, any queries, do write to us, do write in the chat box, and the house is open. We have 3 minutes, but you have to do it in just 1 or 2 questions. Anybody?